the City of Westminster, Tuesday, November 1st, 2022. City Hall, Westminster, Maryland, called to order. First order of business is approval of the meeting summary from our August 2nd meeting. Do I have a motion?
I move to accept the minutes as, or I'm sorry, the meeting summary as written.
I second. All in favor? Aye. So approved. I don't have a copy of this. I'll catch up with Mike later. For tonight's hearing, we're looking at case number. Oh, that's right, yeah. Thank you. 22-10, special exception and variance request. An application by K&T LLC at South Carroll Properties. Oh, let me back up a minute and everybody get introduced here. I'm sorry. We'll introduce everybody present. I'm Ed Kramer, Chair of the Board.
I'm Larry Byrne, Vice Chair.
Brenda Frazier, member of the board.
Karen Roth, counsel to the board.
Mr. Mark.
Mark Depot, the Director of Community Planning and Development for the City of Westminster.
And I'd like to introduce and ask him to introduce himself, our new alternate to the board.
Scott Greer. Appointed in September.
Thank you. Who is presenting this case? So
I will be presenting the case. We have the applicants online through Zoom through Ms. Briza. And she has some witnesses that she would be presenting.
Mark, who is Rick?
That's me, I'm a land surveyor.
Yeah, I'd like to have him on camera, please. I think all of our participants should be on camera.
I don't. Is that a setting that I need to do?
Yes, Rick, you need to allow the video. It should be at the bottom of the screen when you move your mouse.
Share screen? No, it didn't work. Chat.
I know you had it working yesterday, so.
Yeah, it worked yesterday, but
Yeah,
I don't see, I didn't, I don't see anything here where it says I can leave, a start video, mute.
start video. That should work. Let's hopefully.
audio is a little muffled too.
Yeah.
Can you hear me okay?
I can,
Yes. Right.
I apologize. This worked yesterday and I can see.
While we're waiting, we have another, are you here to observe or were you intending to participate, and can we ask who you are?
Certainly, I'd like to participate. I'm a surrounding homeowner. My name is Mark Hoffman, and I'm on lot 2, which is directly across Old Bachman Valley Road from the lot we're in discussion.
Okay.
I don't really see where it says start video.
There you go. We got it. We got it.
Okay,
It worked that time.
so sorry.
Thank you.
Can we ask those, can we ask you all on the screen to say who you are, please?
I'm Rick Stauffer. I'm a land surveyor.
I'm Rachel Briza. I'm with Briza and Associates. I'm the attorney for the petitioner this evening.
Okay. And
My name's Kyle. Kyle Dreyer. I'm the owner of Tri-County Roofing and K&T LLC. Good to see you guys again.
hearing very well.
And do you have a volume you could put up, Mr. Greer?
I do not. Let me check.
We got you.
Okay, I think we're okay now.
A little better this time? Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
And we will ask you to speak a little slowly and clearly as you can, please. when it
No
comes-
problem.
All right. Case number 22-10, special exception and variance request. An application by K&T LLC and South Carroll Properties LLC, the property owner, requesting one, approval of a special exception, operated contractors' equipment and storage yards use pursuant to Article 10 IR Restricted Industrial Zone, Section 164-54C. And two, a variance to Article 10 IR Restricted Industrial Zone, Section 164-58, to allow the special exception use to be located 100 feet in lieu of the required 300 feet from a lot in a residential zone. And three, a variance to Article 16 off-street parking and loading, Section 164-114A, to allow gravel parking area in lieu of the required paved parking area on lot 21B. Re-subdivision of lot 21 West Branch Trade Center plat PB 50 PG 164, located southwest of the Magna Way / Old Bachman's Valley Road intersection in Westminster, Maryland. First order of business will be presentation of the staff summary by Mark Deco.
Thank you, and
Oh, I'm sorry. What? Oh, yes, I should. Okay, you're right. Been a while since. We're gonna get back in the mode there. Anyone who intends to testify, I need you please to raise your hand. We'll do it all simultaneously. And I will swear you. People on the screen, can I see your hands, please? There we go, thank you. Do you swear or affirm under the penalties of perjury that the testimony you are about to give is the truth?
I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Karen.
and so I'll begin.
Yes, sir, please, thank you.
So again, for the record, my name is Mark Depot. I'm the Director of Community Planning and Development representing the city for the zoning appeals case 2210. I'm not going to go over all the three items. It's again a special exception, 2 variances. I do want to point out that prior to the meeting and discussions with the city attorney, the third variance, the ordinance section 164-114A to allow gravel parking area, does not fall under the purview of Board of Zoning Appeals to grant such variance by Maryland code. The code is limited to certain elements of Board of Zoning Appeals can appeal. I believe it's setbacks, distances, area. And this is something that could be determined and discussed at the time of site plan review with the planning commission, but not something that the Board of Zoning Appeals can decide on. And I apologize for the late notice. It's in the staff report, so if we just go through that. If you have any questions, I'm available as well as the city attorney about that. I did have a question about that, but I didn't want to, we did advertise it and I didn't want to miss it in some fashion. And therefore, if it was allowable, that we could have then added. So for the property itself, it's zoned IR, restricted industrial zone. It's lots 21B, STAT number 071555972. That's this yellow highlighted, which should be located over here. Outside. It's this area here, right at the southwest intersection, southwest of the intersection of Magna Way and Old Bachman Valley Road. So it's this area here. And by Google Map, it's this area. And this is just quickly the lot 21B plan that was provided by the applicant, and we'll get more to that as we go through. So again, the first request is for approval of a special exception A contractor's equipment and storage yard is a special exception use in the IR district. The green highlighted area itself depicts the location intended to store building and roofing materials, commercial vehicles, commercial trucks, and empty roll-off dumpsters. And that's this area here. The applicant is also requesting a variance from zoning ordinance section 164-58 and 164-140. Essentially, the zoning ordinance requires a 300-foot distance from residentially zoned properties. The properties along Old Bachman's, which is east of the site of 21B, is zoned residential. It's located in the county. The county city line is essentially Old Bachman's Road itself. So city is this area, this is county. But it is zoned residential, so it is still a valid as part of this requirement and setback of 300 feet. The applicant is proposing a 100-foot distance or a 200-foot variance from the 300 feet. However, the plan actually depicts 110 feet from the area that the special exceptions be located from the residential zone, which would be a 190-foot variance. But again, the applicant, and as advertised, was 100 feet, 200-foot variance. Sorry, that might be a little confusing, I apologize.
Can I ask a question? Sure. Just while you have that up. So it's from the 50-foot building restriction line to the lot line of the properties across the street is 110 feet.
Yes, yes it is. So essentially you have a 50-foot building restriction line and 60-foot right of way. It gives you the 110 feet. And that is the closest distance. If you can see along this, it would actually, increase in distance as this turn occurs. So the closest distance from a residential zone property is 110 feet.
So I have a question too, Mark. The bottom red line there, just above the printing Old Bachman's Valley Road. That's the bottom measurement point.
Yes, that would be the boundary of the county and the residential zone.
Got it.
Again, as I mentioned, the gravel surface is not relevant, so I'm not going to get into that. Some of the outstanding concerns the staff has are due to noise and hours of operation. The applicant is proposing to operate Monday to Saturday from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. The city code section 106-117. I apologize on that. Move this. Limits loud noise to 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday, and 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. on all other days and holidays. So hours of operation must be consistent with the city code. This is a section of the city code that is not the zoning ordinance section. So the Board of Zoning Appeals has the ability to provide a variance to the zoning ordinance itself, but not to the other section of the city code. So this is something the applicant cannot today do, is operate prior to the hours listed in the city code for noise. Other issue, again, as already pointed out, the setback from residential zone. The applicant is proposing a 100-foot setback for the special exception use for a residential zone, which is a 200-foot variance from the required 300 feet. The applicants provide a plan to fix the closest residential zone property as being 110 feet away, and therefore any variance to setback should reflect the provided plan. Parking area tests and environmental impact. Again, this is primarily due to gravel surface, but it is still an issue, as you can imagine, with the setback reduction and gravel parking lot or any activity. You do have the potential of dust and other impacts from that lessened setback. Visual impact with proposed reduction in setback from the residential zone and proximity to the public roadways. Additional screening should be provided along Old Bachman's Valley Road and Magna Way. So with that, the Board of Zoning Appeals, staff recommends that the Board of Zoning Appeals carefully review the provide a finding of fact pursuant to section 164, 161A, 3A 1-3 to either approve or approve the conditions or disapprove case 2210 for lot 21B re-subdivision of lot 21 West Branch Trade Center plat book 50, page 164. If the Board of Zoning Appeals approves 2210, zoning administration recommends that, one, the hours of operation, and then this, I'm very upsetting to see. The hours of operation be limited to 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. on Saturday or Sunday, and on a state or federal holiday, and 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. on all other days, similar to and consistent with City Code Section 106-17. The variance be for 190 feet, and in no case closer than the 50 feet setback on lot 21B as depicted on Exhibit 4, the applicant's provided lot 21B plan. 3, a solid opaque fence be constructed around the contractor's equipment and storage yard use. An additional landscaping be provided along Magna Way and Old Bachman's Valley Road as determined by the City of Westminster Department of Community Planning and Development during site development plan stage.
Mark, before you get off of that,
Yes.
I just want to make sure I understand what solid opaque means.
You can't see through it. It would be a solid fence. It wouldn't be a chain link fence. We're not looking for chain link. We're not looking for the slats of chain link. We're looking for a solid wood fence or other type of fence that would be that would screen or hide the view of the outdoor storage yard.
So if you're not going to allow a chain link fence with slats through it, fabric slats most likely of some sort, that doesn't meet the opaque requirement.
It's just something we typically don't allow. We typically don't allow for screening.
So it would have to be
We
total
have,
screening.
we have allowed at the minimum a black chain link fence with a solid wrapping around it that would be opaque. The slats just over time get damaged and just become more of a nuisance. So again, we're just more consistent. We're looking for screening that we've asked for other businesses or uses where you have outdoor storage.
So again, just so I understand, when you're saying opaque, you're not saying a wooden fence.
It could be a solid wooden fence.
Okay.
A solid wood fence that, wouldn't be a picket fence that can be seen through. It would have to be a solid board on board type fence. For the required parking spaces for company vehicles and mobile equipment must be met per section 164-114A. Again, I think that goes to the dust element, even though the applicant is asking for gravel, this is still an issue that at time of site plan, I believe the Board of Zoning Appeals has the ability to add additional conditions to try to lessen the amount of dust. So in other words, if we do get the planning commission, at least minimally, the required parking spaces still should meet asphalt and concrete. And then 5, that the Carroll County.
Excuse me, Mark, and let me just ask a question, on the parking spaces, are you suggesting that they're talking in their application 20 or 25 trucks plus containers, et cetera, are those required to have parking spaces as well?
The only things required by code would be the actual vehicles, the company vehicles. So vehicles that would come in on a daily basis, that would come in and park in a mobile. We would look at that being surfaced. Those are the ones that will provide them greater impact. Storage of equipment, storage of the roll-off dumpsters, things like that would not have to be. I think that they could ask for or request potential exemption or reduction in the asphalt concrete. Again, the parking area is only those mobile and vehicles or visitor vehicles.
The dump trucks would be considered a vehicle that would need asphalt parking.
Yeah, a vehicle that is mobile is required by the ordinance as a company vehicle that is within the parking area that needs to be dust free. Or any visitors, in this case, the applicant, and they'll speak on this, is not inviting visitors to the site. Again, that would be played out at the time of site plan, that they would demonstrate where these parked vehicles would be. And we're asking that at least that is maintained some type of dust-free surface. This partnership, there's other things they can do as well. It's just the gravel itself is a concern of the dust and everything else you can imagine that could come from that as a daily operation occurs. And then finally, the Carroll County Department of Land and Resource Management and Planning and Zoning approve any gravel surface areas subject to review of environmental impacts. And this is that concern of oils, gases, and other contaminants getting into the ground, leaking through. They'll have to go through stormwater management review and grading review at time of site plan. I just want to make sure they're aware of it, that is a concern that we're going to have as we move forward. And that completes my report. If you have any other additional questions.
Maybe this is a question for the applicant, but I'm gonna ask it of you to start with. Where are they keeping their equipment right now?
My understanding, the applicant can speak to this, they are the same, it's the same business that's adjacent to this that was previously approved by the planning commission of Board of Zoning Appeals. So they store equipment on that property. As far as I know, I don't know if they have other locations within the city, but this, that location that I'm aware of. So this is really an extension or expansion of their business adjacent to this property.
I just, a quick, I think it was number one, I think I heard 8 AM, and it may be a mute point later, but just in case, 7 AM or 8 AM. I heard 8 to 10, but then you had said you recommend 7 AM as the conditions, so you're still outside of the.
Well, the applicant was requesting 6 AM to 7 PM.
So you were trying to meet in the middle.
And well, the city code says that 8 AM and 7 AM is the earliest. So at the earliest you should be operating for having noise or ruckus as part of the city code for public nuisance is that 8 AM on Saturday and Sunday and state and federal holidays and 7 AM on all other days. That's by the city code.
Got it.
So I'm asking them, at least when they start, they meet city code.
Got it.
And the end time of 8 PM is still 1 hour over what they requested. But it is still less than what the city code requires.
That's what I missed, so that's what I needed. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions, Mark? Who's gonna speak first for the applicant here?
I am Rachel Briza, attorney for the petitioner.
It's on you, thank you.
Thank you. Mark, do you want to share the screen with me or to present?
I think you should be given the ability, Rachel, to share the screen.
Okay. Can anyone see my screen at this point?
I can see you. But not your screen.
Mark, I haven't received anything. Should I be looking for something different?
It says you have co-host permission.
Okay, all right, good. But can anybody see my exhibits?
Do you have 2 monitors up?
No, I do not.
Just a quick question while we're going through the technical stuff here. Is there a reason that we're doing this on Zoom rather than here at the City Hall? I'm just curious. No, it does.
I think I was a little confused initially whether it was on Zoom or in person. We went over that yesterday and back and forth with the planning staff, and we were willing to do either in person or via Zoom. So
No, that's fine. I'm not.
yeah.
Just a point of information. So
Yeah, I don't seem to have the ability to share my okay, so here we go. Okay, did that work?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, great. Well, thank you everyone for getting through the technology piece of it. The first thing that I would like to do with the board's permission is to proffer just a very brief opening statement. Then I would like to get into Mr. Rick Stouffer's testimony. He is the surveyor from NTT Associates. I'd like to spend maybe about 20 minutes with Rick going over the plan and some of the exhibits. And then I'd like to call Kyle Dreyer to really talk about the use in detail. And after we get through that, we very much want to open it up for questions and any community input, if that's okay with the board.
Please proceed.
Okay. So good evening. I am Rachel Briza, attorney for the petitioner. My client, Mr. Kyle Dreyer, settled on the purchase of this lot yesterday. So the comment or testimony so far that South Carroll Properties is the owner is no longer correct. The owner is now KNT LLC, and Kyle settled yesterday, so that's great. First, we're going to go through the concept plan that we prepared for tonight. We just want to acknowledge the planning staff recommendations that right now this is a concept plan, and yes, we will definitely be submitting a site development plan as the next step with more detail on the landscaping plan, that kind of thing, types of trees, type of gravel, all of that we will present at the next step. Most importantly, we agree that the site development plan will include details regarding the 50-foot wide landscaping and screening buffer along Old Bachman's Valley Road. And we will get into more of that as we go through the evening. My client, Mr. Dreyer, intends to plant trees, landscape, and screen with input from the neighbors to achieve that visual separation along Old Bachman's Valley Road. So again, tonight we aim to share the vision of the site as a well-organized, clean, and safe location for the storage of the contracting equipment for Mr. Dreyer's expanding roofing company. Two considerations I just wanted to touch on first. First one being that the property is on the edge of a zone. And the fact that it's on the edge of the zone between the IR and the residential should not in and of itself preclude uses permitted elsewhere in the IR zone. The majority of IR zone land in this part of Westminster sits adjacent to agricultural land, an airport, or a more intense industrial use. And it is unique for this IR zone parcel to be located across the street from a residential zone. The second consideration I want to keep in mind for tonight is that a central goal of the 2009 comprehensive plan is to encourage the growth of existing businesses in Westminster. Mr. Dreyer is in his 30s and he intends to spend his career expanding the family business, which has been in operation on the adjacent lot for over a decade. We will start tonight with the testimony of Mr. Rick Stouffer, the professional surveyor who prepared and sealed the plan. May I call Mr. Stouffer with the permission of the board?
Please go ahead.
Okay, so first, Rick, can you just tell us a little bit about your background? I have your CV up here, a little bit about your background, your company, the time you've spent in the industry, and the other times you have testified as an expert.
Sure. I started surveying in 1982. I've been working for the same company, NTT Associates, which was established in the 70s. I got licensed in 2005, and I've been doing surveying for 40 years. We've done a lot of different site plans. I've been an expert witness at hearings and other places like that. The hearing for the contractor's yard on the existing property of Kyle's, I was the witness for that as well.
And I just want to ask the board if they will accept Mr. Stouffer as an expert in surveying, site plan preparation, and land use for the purposes of this hearing.
Yes.
Thank you. All right, so Rick, I'm gonna have you walk us through the plan. First of all, I would like to let everyone know that we submitted this. This is the sealed and signed plan that I have up. We submitted with our application a plan, but it wasn't signed and sealed, and the notes were not all finished. So we would like to, after we have Rick go through it, we would like to submit this as an additional exhibit to tonight as exhibit 4A, or applicants exhibit 4A, just so that we all are working from a signed and sealed plan. Okay, so Mr. Stouffer, will you take us through some of the basics on this plan without getting into too much detail, but give us a sense of like the acreage of the site, the acreage of the proposed area we would like to reserve to be able to put a contractor's yard, and some of the other details?
Sure. So the property currently is 2.4 acres, more or less. It's at the southwest intersection of Magna Way and Old Bachman's Valley Road. It's contiguous with Lot 21C, which is the existing business of K&T. And there is a use in common. So it's like his number 45 is a panhandle lot, and that's how this lot would get access from Magna Way, as well as his existing business gets access from that use in common driveway, so 30 feet wide.
Thank you. And what is the acreage of the entire parcel?
The entire parcel is 2.4. The area hashed in where the yard is going to be is 1.3 acres.
Okay, and just for purposes of clarity, this is the intersection here of Magna Way, Tech Court, and Old Bachman's Valley Road. Is that correct?
Yes.
And I believe the representative from the community, one of the neighbors, is here, I believe from this house. Is that correct? Number 149, Old Bachman's Valley Road, I believe.
He's acknowledged by shaking his head yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, great. So, Mr. Stouffer, these properties around, other than the residential along Old Bachman's Valley Road, are all the other properties zoned IR, as you understand it?
Yes, they are.
Okay. And what are the bulk and height regulations, front yard, side yard setback for this property?
Is height of the building is 50 feet. The building restriction line front yard is 50, and the side and rear 30. We show a 50-foot building restriction line here along Magna and along Old Bachman's Valley Road, because if there was going to be a building on site, I'm not sure which where the building would face, so I wasn't sure which would be considered the front. So I held the more stringent of the two.
Understand. Thank you. And then just to get into some of the notes, the job specific notes on this plan, I would like to talk about the parking calculation a little bit. Can you read it?
So basically, we used the 3 space for 3 spaces for employees for a major shift, plus 1 space for a company vehicle, and then 1 space for the visitors, which comes to 5 off-street parking spaces.
Thank you. And just so to distinguish from the 20 other pieces of equipment, mobile equipment, and the 10 roll-off dumpsters, the idea here is that those pieces are stored on the yard, whereas these spaces are for employees coming in, parking a car, and picking up a vehicle to move it. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, Thank you. All right, let me see if I can get back out of here. Great. Okay. All right, so I think that Mr. Depot went over the general maps and things I was going to present. So I'm going to skip over that part in the interest of keeping us moving. And now I'm going to go to some of the photographs, if that's okay. Let me just move this. All right, so just to get our bearings a little bit with the property, Mr. Stouffer, will you take us through these photographs that were taken on or around the middle of September of this year? And
Sure.
and just walk us through this?
Yeah, we're standing on the common drive looking at the intersection of Magna and Old Bachman's Valley Road.
So where my cursor is right now is Old Bachman's, is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. And this picture here,
That's the intersection of the common drive with Magna Way. That's the sign for the existing business.
and it's your understanding this sign is going to stay the same, we're not changing it at all, is that correct?
To my understanding, yes.
Okay. And this photo,
That's standing within where the proposed yard would be, looking at the intersection again. But it's just closer to the intersection than in the first picture.
and specifically, does this show that there's quite a drop on the edge of this property down from Old Bachman's Valley Road down into the property?
Yeah, the property kind of has berms around pretty much along the roadways there. This current picture shows probably the largest of the berm. As it goes down Old Bachman's Valley Road, it does get less height, but it's kind of almost like a tray kind of. There's the berm, and then the property is relatively flat for the most part.
Thank you. And then this picture looking the other direction.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about what we're looking at over here?
So that's I think that's Old Bachman Valley Road.
You've got it. Yes, this is Old Bachman's Valley
That's the
Road.
screening across the street, and then there's some trees over there, and there's the barn that you see that is an IR zone property. And as you go from there to the left, that would be the residential area.
Thank you. And this picture is taken.
Standing in the parking lot of the existing business, looking out over where the contractor yard would be.
Right, and this is the berm that we were looking at a few pictures ago.
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. And then the last picture here.
It's looking down the common driveway. Shows the fire hydrant, and it shows the access, and the center portion would be where the proposed yard is going to go.
Great. And I believe these are the neighbors' homes across the way here, correct?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Okay, moving on. The next step that I would like to take is, Mr. Stouffer, is I'd like you to walk us through, in your expert opinion, essentially the 15 factors that the board needs to consider when granting a special exception. Again, I want to keep the answers relatively brief to keep us moving this evening, because I want to keep time for questions and answers at the end. But I feel we need to go through these questions. So first, in your expert opinion, will the use be appropriate given the number of people residing or working in the immediate area?
Yeah, there's 4 residential across the street. The rest of the area is all IR. And the proposed adequate screening and tree planting to help minimize any site issues.
Thank you. Will the use contribute to the orderly growth of the community?
Yeah, it's in the IR zone, and I believe it's in compliance with the plan.
with and also in compliance with the 2009 comprehensive plan?
I believe so, yes.
Will the use unduly impact traffic conditions and facilities?
I don't believe so. It's limited amount of traffic there. He's expanding an already business just to have things. I think there's going to be more storage there than there's going to be additional vehicles going in and out. I don't think there's any large amount of traffic that's going to be different from the way it is currently.
Thank you. And what is the effect of the proposed use upon the peaceful enjoyment of people in their homes?
Well, I mean, I guess the screening, I mean, you're going to see the screening and the planning, and that would be the helping to minimize any effect that there would be from the yard. Although I've been to the existing yard and it is quite well maintained.
Do you believe that the use will reduce property values at all in this area?
It's zoned IR. I mean, this is a very minimal, what they're proposing is minimal to what could be proposed here. So I think it's, I don't foresee it.
And I'm going to break the next question into two parts. So what is the effect of odors, dust, gas, smoke, and fumes? So any smells coming from this use that you can see?
When we were on site, we didn't notice any at all of any of those. So again, there was not even noise really. It was.
But when the use is up and running, do you think that the trucks going in and out will be a fairly minimal use compared to what could be allowed on this site?
Yeah, I mean, it could be a commercial
Right.
building there with a lot of different business, people coming in and out, and this is very minimal as opposed to what could be proposed.
And it's your understanding that no manufacturing is going to occur on site, is that correct?
So that's my understanding,
All
yes.
right. And then the other part of this question is vibrations, glare, and noise, which we kind of touched on, but let's address glare for the lighting, which I believe we get into a little bit later, but do you think that there'll be any significant lighting glare coming from this property?
No, I think they were proposing like having a light up near where they're going to propose the 5 spaces, but I don't think there was, to the best of my understanding, that was really going to be the only light, and they were going to use whatever lighting would be, low, the best possible lighting to reduce glare.
Is the proposed use the most appropriate use of land and structures for this particular location?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Is the use the most appropriate use of land? So using IR for a light industrial purpose, because this isn't a restricted industrial zone, does this use fit with this location?
Yeah, it does. And as I said, it's minimal to what could be proposed here.
Is the use required for public convenience and necessity? So is having a valued roofing contracting company an important resource for the community?
I mean, I believe so. Everyone needs a roof.
Yeah.
And it's well established. This is second generation. They've been in business for a number of years. I think that, and from what I understand, they're here to stay. So I do think so.
And are there any type or kind of structures in the vicinity where public gatherings may be held, like schools and religious establishments, that would be in the immediate vicinity of this particular use?
None that I'm aware of.
And is the proposed use compatible, in your opinion, is the proposed use compatible with the surrounding neighborhood?
Yes.
And is the use consistent with the purpose, spirit, and intent of the zoning regulations, in your opinion?
Yes, I believe so.
And are there adequate facilities, so sewer, water, schools, transportation, and other services, and the ability of the city to supply such services in this case?
They're not planning to, I don't think they're planning any buildings, so they're not going to have sewer or water that's on the site.
And just to continue on that line a little bit, will there be any like spotta pots or anything like that on the site?
Not that I'm aware of.
Correct. So the staff will, where is the base building for the staff to go to?
It's- You're right, on lot 21C is that right where your cursor is.
Thank you. And are there any limitations of firefighting equipment and the means for access for fire, police, and health services that you can see?
No, there's a fire hydrant on site, and there's also a 30-foot easement and that's existing for and it's been adequate up until this point.
And do you have any concerns regarding traffic, including parking and safe access of cars to highways or roads?
No, they're gonna be using the same exact access that they're using now, and yeah, and they're gonna be parking as close to the building as possible, so it's gonna be as so yeah, I don't foresee any issues.
And just to expand on that answer a little bit, the ingress and egress for the contractor's yard, it will come down this lane, correct? The macadam driveway, which is a private drive.
That's correct.
And the goal at this time is to probably put a little bit of a loop road in here, primarily so that there'll be no vehicles reversing out, stacking, or anything like that. Do you think we have ample space on the site to be able to do all of that, not create any dangerous road situation?
Yeah, it's 1.3 acres. That's adequate.
And then just a few more questions to finish up on the special exception, some more general questions. Do you believe that this proposed special exception use will not generate adverse effects, again, back to the noise, dust, stormwater issues, lighting? It will not produce any greater adverse effects here versus elsewhere in the zone? If you understand my question.
Yeah, I think I do, and
Yeah.
I don't believe so.
Okay, and then also just to recap, which was something we've already said before, a goal of the 2009 comprehensive plan, goal E2 objective 3, is to support the retention and expansion of existing businesses. You believe, in your opinion, allowing Mr. Dreyer to expand into this location will likely facilitate this goal of the comprehensive plan?
Yeah, he's expanding out, and he's contiguous with the other plant, where his existing business is. So I think it fits perfectly.
And in your opinion, does the proposed use threaten the health, safety, morals, or general welfare of the community?
No, I don't.
Okay. Well, now we're going to switch tracks to the variance.
Before you
Yes,
do,
yes,
I'd like to ask another question.
absolutely.
If, Mr. Stauffer, Stauffer, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
If all the applicable setbacks are applied, how much of the property is left for development?
So if I understand your question, you're saying if we were to follow the regulations of the 300 foot, what would be left?
Yes,
It would be a very small triangular shaped piece of property, approximately 50 feet at its base, approximately 150 feet maybe-ish, at its depth.
Am I understanding the question correctly? Was that more of a floor area ratio question, or was that question related to the variance?
to the variances, really.
Okay, yes. And that is exactly where we're heading, because that's the next question that I was going to ask Mr. Stauffer, was if we were required to comply with section 164-58, which requires 3 times the distance specified in section 164-140. If we were required to actually apply that 300 feet, you can see, Mr. Stauffer, we would be somewhere in this vicinity.
Right, yeah. I'm
Correct.
further up. It would, like I say, it would be like a triangular shaped base at 50 feet, kind of like along, like parallel to Magna. And then as you come down the common drive, it would be only 150 feet. So it would be a very small triangular shaped piece.
So something like that, maybe.
Yes.
Okay.
I have another question.
Yes.
I know there's a site development plan to be completed as yet, but has any thought been given ahead of time that might inform us in terms of how and where on that particular parcel different types of vehicles will be, and other, like the roll-off containers and so on, might be placed?
So I think if it's okay, if we could save some of those questions getting into when I have Mr. Dreyer testify, but
Sure.
just for purposes of, just getting into it a little bit, I imagine that we will most likely store roll-off dumpsters as close to this community building, or sorry, the commercial building here as possible and out of the way, right? But it's all going to be about safe loading and unloading and all those rules that we will have to work with. I imagine some kind of a semicircular driveway pull in or loop so that there's easier ingress and egress to the property, and easier ability to makes it quicker, right? To load and unload, and we don't need to reverse. That's one of the big things we would like to not do, is not be reversing vehicles when we don't have to,
Okay.
if that answers the question. Okay, so with the variance, we're not going to address the second variance we requested, but just with regard to the one variance that we're asking for this evening. Mr. Stouffer, in your opinion, are there any exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions with regard to this intended use that do not generally apply to other properties in the same zone? So I'm asking about uniqueness. Is there something that makes this property unique? And why, as to why we need the variance in the first place?
It sits on it is unique. It sits right on the edge of the zone. There is a road that separates the property from the residential from the proposed yard. And I mean, and if we followed the regulation, it would leave a very small area.
Right, and that really leads to the next question, which is the variance necessary for the preservation and enjoyment of substantial property rights possessed by others in the IR zone?
Yeah.
It is my understanding, Mr. Stouffer, and if you can affirm this, that there'll be about 11 types of different uses that would require special exceptions, needing a 300-foot setback from a residential zone that would not be permitted on this site just by virtue of the fact of its location. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
And do you believe this would be an unjust result if we weren't to get this variance?
Yes, I do.
And then the one other question regarding the variance is, will the approval of this variance be of substantial detriment to adjacent properties, or will it materially impair the purpose of this chapter, meaning the zoning chapter?
There's going to be adequate screening. I don't believe so.
Okay, and that's because of the public roadway, which you've just talked about, the new trees and landscaping and screening.
It also sits lower than the other properties.
Right. And just to make it very clear, this section here, this 50-foot swath along Old Bachman's Valley, that is where the substantial focus of the trees, bushes, screening, all in here is where the landscape plan will detail all those different plantings. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
All right. So I'm going to skip. Yes.
In that regard. You have a sense of how much of I don't want to use the same word, but setback from the roadway, the plantings and screening will take place at this point?
My understanding in conversations with Mr. Dreyer are that we're going to try and put landscaping all through here. So some bushes, some deciduous trees, some evergreen, make it a very nice section of planting to create a buffer, a true buffer between the residential properties on this side of the road and the use on this side of the road.
I guess I'm just trying to get a sense of how much space are we talking about that exists between the property line, if you will, that and the bottom of that green area,
It should be a 50-foot section here,
right?
and it should be a 30-foot section along Magna Way, 30-foot wide. The width will be 30 feet here and 50 feet here.
In that bottom section where we've got 50 feet, I'll use the word separation.
Yes,
But that's where the screening and the plantings and that kind of thing will go. Generally speaking, do you have an idea of where in there it's gonna go? It's gonna be kind of at the midpoint, it's gonna be closer to the property line, it's gonna be closer to the green area.
is it okay for me to ask Mr. Dreyer to
Sure.
respond? Mr. Dreyer, can you just talk about the extent of the planting you're considering along this 50-foot wide buffer here?
Yes, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes,
Yeah, I'd like to, if I'm gonna use that space, I'd like to utilize most of the 50 feet for screening. I probably set back towards Old Bachman's Valley Road to give a little bit of buffer. So when the screening does, fully grow and, becomes, I guess, in its adult or mature stage, that it's not actually consuming into the lot that's being used. So, if we have a tree that, a cypress or something that grows a 12-foot base or something, I'd probably bring that back, that 12 feet towards Bachman Valley. But that whole side there on the on the Old Bachman Valley side, it's such a hill up to the road that really utilizing most of it would probably be appropriate, just because there's nothing else really that you can do with that area.
okay.
Well, that's great. So, Mr. Dreyer, I'm just going to continue with you and keep asking you some questions here. So
Okay.
I'm looking forward to getting into this part of it. First of all, I thought maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, your family's company, and why you want to expand into this lot, why you bought the lot yesterday.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. So my father started the business back in 1995, and I believe we built the building here in 2010. Between 2009, 2011, I know it was a little bit of a process. I bought the company from him in April of 2021, and so far business has been pretty good given the circumstance. With the economy, a couple of things have changed. I have been having to stage more material just because of the influx has kind of slowed down. It's a little bit more difficult for me to to load jobs. I do mainly industrial roofing. So I'm having to stage a little bit more materials, but nothing that's really, I believe that nothing that's really affected any of the adjoining properties. I bought the property basically because I do plan on being here. I was born and raised in Carroll County. I don't have any reason to move. I do live about 6 miles away from my business location, so it's convenient for me to be in this area. I do plan on growing, as do a lot of people. So I'd really wanted to get ahead of this before I didn't, try to pursue this. I didn't want to have to regret it when someone else purchased and try to develop or whatnot. My office window looks right out at this field. So I sit here day to day, and I do, I think it's something that I can utilize in the future. I don't know. I definitely plan on staying here. I was in the Marine Corps for 4 years back in 2008. And I kind of take pride in how I keep my yard now. I'm sort of anal when it comes to, parking things, keeping things nice. I'm kind of a stickler to my guys, I'm always picking on them. And honestly, any of the neighbors that do look down, they probably see me out there on a forklift or, cleaning stuff up just as much as anyone else, because I can't stand to walk by and see a mess. So, we do take pride. I mean, just in the aerial, the picture there that you're looking at on the screen, everything's backed in nicely. We have small amount of materials stored. We really do try to keep it nice. I want people to still be comfortable living in their homes. They were here first, and I understand that, but it is an industrial area, and I do appreciate being able to run my business here, and hopefully we can move forward, and if as I expand, I think this will be a really good growth opportunity for me.
Thank you very much. The next questions or group of questions I want to ask are really about the contractor yard itself, how you intend to design it, how it will be constructed, how it will be maintained, those kind of things. If you could address specifically why you want an impervious surface, that would be helpful.
Okay, so I'd really like to start, as things grow and as I need to, move or rearrange equipment, I would like to start. The first thing I'd like to do, I settled yesterday, so my first plan of attack is to get, my screening started here on the old Bachman Valley side of the property. I do believe that, given the circumstances of the neighbors there, I want to try to get ahead of that, because as time goes, I will be, utilizing part of the property. I'd like to start closer to my building if I can. And I have very minimal equipment now as it is. So, for the time being, I think that just being able to get some of my employees over to park in this area, maybe bring a couple of my trucks around just to free up some space behind my actual building. Excuse me. The impervious area, I'd like to use like a stone base. I do plan on using a protection mat, weed barrier, and having a stone base, mainly because over the years, depending on what I plan to, do with the property as a final result, I do want to be able to move this stuff around. So, for instance, if I'm using a gravel area, stay close to the building, and, plans change and say I want to, file, 5 to 7 years down the road, file to build a structure somewhere on the property. I'd like to be able to do that without having to move asphalt and all the, more permanent stuff. For now, I just kind of need a little bit of room to expand vehicle wise. And then there's the minimal, my roll-off cans, and, a small amount of construction material. My stuff does move, I guess, as a roofing company, we have our busy times, we have our slow times. So there may be time where, we're very active in this area. And then there's times where we're not active at all. We may not move something for a couple days, a couple weeks. As far as material goes, you may see a lot of stuff in one day and then the next day it could be gone. We solely, our productivity happens on site, on job sites. So we really move stuff, small amounts of stuff we'll move frequently. But we do really take, stuff on the site. A lot of our equipment stays on site. I just need somewhere to put it while we're not actually on site working.
And you mean not when you're on a job site?
On a job site.
Yeah,
sorry.
all your equipment, basically the way you're making money is when your equipment is on a job site and not located here.
Right, exactly.
But
this is just, I like to say it in a joking matter, this is kind of where my stuff sleeps. Because like I said, it does go out. It's out on job sites, making money. And, you know, some of my jobs can last months. So, you know, a lot of my major equipment, you know, it's off site for weeks or months at a time.
So, and a question I just want to follow up on here with regard to your actual vehicles. When I've seen your vehicles, they're very well painted, very well maintained, they're serviced. These vehicles are in good working order, and they are a type of advertising for you as they're out on sites. I just want you to expand a little bit on how you maintain your modern fleet of vehicles, and the fact that they will not be serviced here, right? You're
Right.
not doing any kind of equipment work on this site. You're not actually manufacturing anything on this site, correct? It's really just for storage. If you could speak to that a little bit.
Right, and that is a good point. I appreciate it. Yeah, we do take pride in, for being a roofing company, we do try to keep our people in, you know, nicer equipment. I don't have a lot of jalopies laying around. A lot of contractor yards you see have, you know, old equipment broken down in the back. We really don't hold on to stuff that, you know, is disabled or doesn't work anymore. We do not service our vehicles on site. A lot of our vehicles, honestly, I try to trade in or sell or get rid of vehicles after a certain amount of time, just to keep my fleet updated and reliable. So, you know, we don't do a lot of maintenance, or really any maintenance or service on our vehicles or equipment, you know, at this facility. All of my
Thank you.
trucks are 2015 or newer. So, you know, I try to keep a, you know, least amount of an eyesore as I can for my customers and for my neighbors.
Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
how many? Oh, yes.
Regard to the vehicles, more specifically, I guess, to, I mean, I've seen your vehicles, you know, in the community, and I would tend to agree with you. They do appear to be well maintained. I've got a question though about the roll-on, roll-off containers.
Okay.
And in the pre-hearing statement, I think it was mentioned there could be as many as 10. How many do you have now? Are they in relatively good condition? And do you have more than one mover of those roll-on, roll-offs?
Okay, so great question. Thank you. So my cans, I use 12-yard roll-off cans. I do paint and re-sign them every other year. I have one truck that moves the equipment as far as the roll-off cans, and they are not used on site as on-site trash. These cans stay on site empty. Every evening as we're done our jobs off-site, my driver, he goes to the landfill and he, you know, dumps the trash off, and the can comes off the truck empty. If there's ever storage of a full can, it stays on the truck with the truck tarp. So there's no risk of flying debris or trash blowing. Right now we have 6. I put 10 in there because I do plan on purchasing a couple more. But like I said, I do maintain them. They get painted every other year, and they get new signs on the can every year or every other year. I apologize.
One other question, to this point, given you've been there in that area for, I think you said 10 years,
Yes.
have there been any complaints that you received from neighbors?
I have not received any complaints. No.
Okay. Thank you.
And just to expand on the vehicles themselves, what is the size of the largest vehicle that you have in your fleet?
So my largest vehicle is I have a 26-ton boom truck, or crane, as you may call it. That truck goes out to site. We do like to leave it on site when we have bigger projects. So it's not a permanent fixture, but that is my largest vehicle.
And will there be any gasoline storage facility, anything like that on the site?
No fuel storage on site.
And what about security cameras? Do you have any currently on your existing building, and will you be adding any? Or,
I do. I actually have 13 security cameras around my facility. And I actually I redid those this year, brand new system. And I added 2 more to the side of the building facing this lot in anticipation of hopefully purchasing it. So
great. And then just to reconfirm what Mr. Stouffer said, any lighting that you add will be located as close to your access driveway as possible. Is that your concept right now?
yes, it is.
Yeah, and as far away from the homes as possible. And all that lighting will be shielded downward so that it is not shining toward the houses. Is that your
Yes,
intention?
that is correct. We currently don't have any lights that stay on all night long, and I'd like to keep it that way. I don't have any reason to have, I guess you'd picture like a Walmart parking lot that's lit up all night long. I really don't anticipate anything like that in the future. If we do need to add lights for, winter hours, when the sun isn't up as much, yes, they will be along the easement, the access road, and we will keep it to a minimum for sure.
I have one other question.
Yes.
Coming back to the proposed gravel surface. Your pre-hearing statement says that it will be professionally designed. Have you got some concepts you can talk to about what that might consist of to help abate the concerns for any dust and noise and other considerations?
Okay, so I do plan on, I've already spoken to someone that owns an excavating company. They will draw up a design for me. I believe that there's, a protection mat, weed barrier that is, to be put in place. And then per the weight of the vehicles, I believe there's a set amount of ballast that's required for certain, weight vehicles. So we're not, I guess, creating mud or, a messy issue. I do plan on bringing them in. I haven't had anything drawn up yet because I wasn't sure how this hearing was going to go, to be honest. And, I want to try to keep it within my budget, before knowing my result here. So.
I understand. Thank you.
And just a couple more questions, and then I will open it up to everybody. So water drainage issues, are there any water drainage issues on the site that you are aware of, or does the existing stormwater management plant pond that was designed as part of this entire West Branch Trade Center take care of all the all the stormwater drainage needs as best you know?
Yes, I have not seen any ponding or standing water on this property since I've been here.
And it's your understanding that this all drains down to this pond over here. Can you see what I'm pointing
Yes,
at on
I
the
see it.
screen? Okay,
Yes,
great.
all the civil engineering, I believe, has been already done as far as the water management on this property.
And also the civil engineering was done as part of this entire West Branch Trade Center for the ingress and egress of this particular access point to the parcel you've just bought. Is that your understanding?
Yes.
So the sight lines here, you've been coming up and down this driveway for 10 years. Is that?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And then just the final question is, how are you going to maintain the grass and the trees and the other screening so that you keep a nice property for the community?
So I currently have a landscaping company that maintains my property we're on now. I do plan on turning this lot over to them also, just to keep it part of the contract. And I'd like to keep the entire lot maintained as I, grow on to use it. It could be some time as I use 10 or 15 or 20 or even 50% of the lot. I'd still like to maintain the entire surface. As far as the screening trees go, I'd really like to keep, all the neighbors in the loop. I'm more than willing to to have the neighbors reach out or I can reach to them about, maybe what they desire. If they're gonna be stuck looking at my screening, I would appreciate giving them a say to what they're gonna be staring at. I do really take pride in my property at home. And I'd ask my neighbor to do the same if he was gonna put something up. Everybody kind of wants that say to what they're gonna be looking out their front door at. So I do respect and appreciate their input. I would like to get ahead of the screening trees as soon as possible. Just because this stuff takes time to grow. And I'd like to, as time goes on, not have to worry or sweat, trees that are damaged or not growing or dead. I'd like to try to keep ahead of it, and keep that maintained. So.
And along those lines, it is your intention to bring in a professional landscape architect to help with planning the landscape buffer?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. Well, that wraps it up for our side of the presentation, and we're willing to take any additional questions or give you any other information as best we can. And I will stop sharing the screen if you want, or I can
Take that up when I have a quick question. The property, the current building, is that just offices, or is what else happens in that? And right behind that, between the building and Old Buckland Valley Road, is that just your empty lot? No, on the right side.
On the grass
Yeah.
side. Yes, that is a, well, I'll start with your first question. We do have offices in our building, but I do have 5 storage, indoor storage bays. We don't do any manufacturing inside the building. I do like to keep, our vehicles out of the weather. We really just park our trucks in there at night. Smaller materials that can be moved by hand. We keep inside power tools, equipment like that. And that's the main use of the building now. The property next to the building to the right, it's actually, I guess, a separate building lot on the same parcel. And my plan, people ask me, why not just expand to the right of the building? I'd really like to, in the future, add to the building itself, to that right, but not have to worry about having a shortage of, parking or, whatnot there. If somebody were to purchase this lot 21B, and then I were to expand my business on the lot that I have now, I'd be really crammed in a small lot. I do plan on growing. I plan on being here. I'm 32 years old. I don't plan on retiring anytime soon, obviously. So I do want to try to keep my options for expansion, as open as I possibly can.
Okay. Thank you. I just want to make sure that was yours too, and it.
Yes.
Perfect.
I have a few questions or comments. Yeah, the one thing that strikes me, it's sometimes it's what you don't say, it becomes more important than what you do say. And what I've seen, for example, in your photographs, you really minimize the residential areas over there. The photos that you give us, they're way off in the distance. You can't really get a sense of how this is going to impact, the residential area. And as the staff report indicates, the residential area is part of your community, is part of, of the area. So that has to be, a significant part of your presentation. And I haven't heard much at all, frankly, about that part of, your community that will be impacted. So, for example, Mr. Stouffer, when he was asking or answering the questions, 15 questions, when he asked about the orderly growth of the community, he refers specifically only to the IR zone and said nothing about how it would impact the residential areas. Likewise, the conservation of property values. Obviously, to me, that's a big question, that I need answered, because just by experience, if you will, at putting this is an increase of the exterior use of the area around there. You got your inside offices and a few vehicles, but now you're talking about 20 vehicles plus 10 containers, et cetera, so at some point down the road. So, and there's, with a gravel surface, there's gotta be dust, there's gotta be noise. And, you know, you haven't addressed how that's gonna impact, you know, the residential area. That's a major concern for me. It is a part of the whole overall issue of whether we give this special exception and variance. I guess I would ask Mr. Stouffer, have you done any noise studies or such on this property so that you know, I would understand just, you know, you're saying that 25 vehicles will be going out in the morning, 25 will be coming back at night. It's not as if they're going out like school buses in and out, you know, periodically. It sounds like they're all gonna go out at one time and come back within a short period of time. And that dust, to me, that dust and noise is gonna impact the residential areas. So for me to grant a special exception here, I have to be comfortable that you have more of a understanding of the impact on the values, property values, and of the you know, how it affects the peaceful enjoyment of people in their homes. Yeah, I haven't heard much on that, so you know, I at this point, if you could answer that question.
So we did not do a noise study on this property. I can attest to all the times that we and my crew were on site. You know, that's what I based my answer on.
Have you done any, excuse me, have you done any noise studies on this particular property?
No, sir, we didn't do a noise study on this property.
No, we have not done any noise studies on this property at this time. One thing that I would like to ask Mr. Stouffer, maybe for you to refer to too, is the permitted uses as of right. Right now, this is a IR zoned parcel, and it is my understanding that due to the size of the lot, that at least a 20,000 square foot building that could be at least 50 feet high would be permitted as a right on this property, assuming it met the floor area ratios and the setbacks, et cetera, and was able to provide sufficient parking for its particular use, that a significant building could go in here, and that building, there was a building of exactly that type contemplated a few years ago, which actually shows on a couple of the documents that I have. So my question gets to the intensity of the use that Mr. Dreyer is proposing versus the intensity of the use that would be permitted as of right in this industrial park that's been designed and planned for. If you could talk to that a little bit.
Well, there was a plan that I saw somewhere. I don't know if you have a copy of it. Like I said before, this is a very minimal use. The neighboring parcel is already being used for the same intent that we're proposing for this site. So the times that we were there, again, for the noise and dust and that, there was nothing noticed there when we were on site. I've been to the site quite a few times over the course of the first hearing and this one. It's very minimal, in my opinion, to what could be there, what was actually proposed in a prior drawing that I did see, which I think would have way more impact on the neighbors residentially, or the residential lots, looking at basically the same thing like the building that is in front of the current building. I think it's a bank with a bunch of buildings and parking, and they've improved the entire site. So my testimony to what that was based upon what could be, and this is very minimal to that. And the site that the times that I did spend on the site, we certainly didn't notice anything that would be detrimental to a residential lot.
If I
And-
can respond, first of all, in terms of what could be built there, that's a hypothetical, it's not before the board right now. What we're dealing with this particular application. And in terms of the noise that you experience now on lot 21C, that's a significantly lower public use than having 20 trucks and 10 containers. So you're it's apples and oranges as far as I can see from your testimony.
Mr. Dreyer, can I ask you to testify about how many actual pickups there are a day and how that really works? Because I just think we need a little more clarification as to, when your staff will pick up, when they will drop off, and how many movements actually happen in a particular day. And I know you testified that it changes, right? Some days there's really not much. And if you could testify maybe on an average day, what that would look like.
Okay, so currently I have one roll-off truck and I have two larger trash, I guess dump trucks, you can call them. I have my 26-ton crane that we talked about. Out of those commercial vehicles, I think we're only using, daily average. One will come and one will go. On a busy day, both, maybe two of the medium-sized dump trucks will leave. We're on the road. We're normally out on a job site at least 8 to 10 hours. So it's very few and far between. Delivery-wise, we only receive maybe 1 or 2 outsourced deliveries a week. We really don't have a lot of traffic that comes from the building itself. As far as like pickup trucks, right now I have 4 crews that go out to do service and roof maintenance. They're in F-250s. I have 3 F-150s that my salesman and project manager runs. And they're most of the time, they come in, I let them guys, as far as the F-150s, those guys can take the trucks home. So they'll come in the morning. They're normally here from, 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. and then they're back out. They're normally facilitated around the building, more or less than in a, in the actual parking lot. But no, it's very minimal use for what you're expecting. I know we put a number on the amount of vehicles trying to, just plan for the future. But as of right now, it's very minimal use. I only have 1 truck driver currently that's actually, running these larger trucks.
Let me just point, I understand your current operation. And we approved, the exception, I believe it was a special exception last time. But you're asking by us granting this special exception, you're asking for a significant potential growth in that area in terms of the number of trucks. I'm not talking about your trucks and your activity now, I'm talking in the future. And if we give you that special exception with the amount of traffic you're projecting here, we have to take into account the residential area, which is still part of the community that you're in.
I understand.
But Kyle, I want to make sure I understand, because I thought we said in the pre-hearing statement that you were going to be generating somewhere between 6 to 10 extra trips a day compared to what your existing use is now. Do you think that's reasonable? Because again, what we're asking for is the max storage, not the max trips in and out. If
Right.
that makes any sense. Does that make sense what I'm trying to get at there?
I thought it was 20 trucks storage and 25 to. Yeah, 25 trips projected during the AM peak and less than 25 trips during the PM peak. So it's not 6 or 16, it's, you know. That's my concern is, you know, the neighborhood itself. The RS, you know, the industrial area, I'm not concerned about because that's pretty well developing on its own. I think in your submission, you mentioned that this 121B was one of the only lots that was undeveloped in this area. So my concern is that I'm repeating myself, but my concern is, you know, what happens if we, you know, give you that kind of carte blanche, if you will, to expand, which, you know, I would understand if I were in your position. I'd want as much as, you know, I could handle, and I do appreciate that.
Okay, and you know, obviously with my growth and expansion, I'd like to, you know, maybe looking into the future, and I don't want to buy anything now that I don't want to bite off more than I can chew now, but obviously as things grow, I mean, we have a paved facility now. And as things really do grow to full expansion, you know, obviously we'll take the precaution to, you know, bring in, you know, asphalt or concrete. I'm just kind of asking for bare minimal right now, as far as the impervious ground. You know, and I'd like to try to, you know, fit with the rest of the industrial park as time goes on.
And then maybe just to also expand on the shielding from the residential community, because that I believe is one of the biggest issues that we need to discuss. That 50 feet wide area that you're intending to plant, what is your goal of what that will look like at the end? Will that be a fairly solid looking area of growth so that the residences are going to be much more blocked moving into the future? They're going to have a lot less visibility of the whole industrial park once you come in and do this landscaping plan, which is pretty wide. I mean, a 50-foot buffer strip is pretty wide as those trees mature over time. So what do you think that's going to look like? What do you think that strip of that 50 feet wide buffer will look like?
So I would like to, if I had to vision it, my plan would be, you know, a lot of the evergreen sort of screenings. I do want to kind of break it up a little bit and, you know, maybe throw in a couple hardwood, smaller, you know, flowering trees, stuff like that. But it's the purpose of the screening is for the dust, and it is for the noise, and it is for the light, which is why I would utilize as much as I can. But circling back to what we discussed before, I will be having a landscape professional, you know, draw up a plan for the best option that we can, you know, that we can have here to protect these people from having any issues, you know, with noise, dust, light pollution, you know, to make it so they're still comfortable at their home. So.
Thank you.
Can I ask about the hours? Because you asked for an exception to the, to start at 6 a.m., for example. What do you currently run at? Do you have an exception currently? Or are you going with the 7 a.m. city regulations?
So my hours of operation are actually 8 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Okay.
We do have a random drive through a little bit before 8, or we typically, my crews leave the building. Things start moving around 7 AM. But my actual office hours are from 8 AM to 4 PM, and that's when you would expect any deliveries or anything like that.
What was the reasoning behind asking for the 6 AM exception then?
I do like to just be prepared for if I had to send a crew or a truck driver. I do a lot of work out of state, New Jersey, Philadelphia, Richmond, Virginia. Sometimes we do like to have, people get on the road earlier. Typically we would have everything loaded up, there's no machinery really running around, too early. But I do like to have, an option to have a driver leave, as early as possible.
But that would be an occasional event. Is
Occasional,
that?
yes,
yeah.
very, very few and far between. Typically, we're all there around 7 AM, to get the day started.
One other point that I wanted to bring up was the planning staff recommendation for a fence around the whole contractor's yard. Kyle, can you talk to the challenge of putting a fence around the entire yard and the challenges that will create?
So I really like to focus solely on, a more natural, screening. I think the fences, everybody's worried about the industrial park. Well, your solid fence, in my opinion, gives more of the industrial look than some actual, trees that can bloom or green or, evergreen trees or trees that, turn colors in the fall. I really like to try to keep a natural look. I mean, I also, I have to look out of my window and see this stuff. I'd really like to try to keep it as natural looking as possible, as far as my screening goes.
Right. So it's not really a question of expense for you. It's more a question of what does the entire area look like and how can you change the streetscape along Old Bachman's Valley Road to make it a nicer place to be.
Right. I don't have anything here that needs to be, locked down, secured. I have no reason, to put a fence or a wall or whatever you call it, in front of these people's homes. I'd like to avoid it. Cost wise, honestly, it's probably a fence to me would be a cheaper option or a cheaper route as it is. I'm willing to, to bite off a little bit extra here, to give these people something a little bit better, to look at.
So when we talk about like visual separation or visual screening, it's not just the trees that are required by the ordinance, which are the trees at 30 foot on center. I believe they're 2.5 inch caliper that you're going to do, right? That's required by the ordinance. But what you're talking about doing is way more than that. It would, in essence, the goal is to create a visual barrier here with bushes and different height trees, different evergreens, different deciduous, a mix to create a true visual barrier without a fence. Is that what you're
Right.
thinking?
That is correct. Yeah, I would like to, like you said, the minimum is 30 feet on center. I'd like to turn to my, I'll lean on my landscaping professional, but in my opinion, yeah, I'd like to try to really tighten it up and thicken it up. A lot of these screening trees, they call for 8 to 12 feet, and I'm going to try to go with what the actual trees are recommended for.
And just so I'm clear, if you were to build a fence, it would be somewhere along this 50-foot building restriction line, correct?
Yes.
And that would be behind 50 feet of landscaped area, as well as down the hill, especially in this location, so that the goal of a fence is somewhat lost because it's behind all of this landscaped area as well as down a hill. So it may not really achieve much. The better option, in your opinion, would it be to plant this area with a nice landscaped
Right. Yeah, I
hillside?
believe that, and I don't know the exact measurement, Rick may know, but I believe at the highest point of that bank is 8 to 10 feet from Old Bachman Valley Road. So for the fence to have any effect, it would have to be up closer to the road, to serve any purpose. So, putting it down, yeah, like you said, putting it down at the bottom kind of serves no purpose. I'm trying to, like I said, I'm trying to prevent the look of the fence perimeter. I'd like to really, provide more of a natural, a natural screening for these people, joining this lot.
And Mr. Stover, actually, could you testify as to some of these elevations here, say from this house, number 149, Old Bachman's Valley Road? Maybe also testify to some of the distances as well. That would be helpful.
So at 149, the rough elevation adjacent to houses of 783, the road is somewhere around 769. And the floor, we'll call the bottom of the tray, is at 755. That's at its highest. So as from 149, as you go down the road, it's not quite as severe as that. From 145, I have.
Well,
down.
I'm sorry, Rick, just to go back to 149, just to simplify that math for me a little bit. The height, we'll call the doorstep here of this property, number 149. If we're standing on this doorstep looking out over this property, approximately how much does it go down from that doorstep all the way down to this yard?
Approximately 28 to 30 feet ish.
Okay, thank you. And how far? I mean, we can see on the plan, it'll be 240 feet.
240 from the actual.
Right.
photos.
Right. And in all likelihood, we're honestly probably not utilizing this corner of the space anyway. It's more likely that it's all going to be more located in this vicinity as you enter and do some kind of circular or semicircular driveway. Okay. Are there any other questions from? Does Mr. Mark Hoffman have any questions for Mr. Dreyer?
Yeah, sure. I appreciate everyone's testimony and the interest that the panel gave to the residential aspect of the proposal. I'm not sitting here trying to be an obstacle to Mr. Dreyer's advancement or growth of his company. I just I have a concern where if you could go back to the one panel where it has the overhead with the red roof.
Yes, yes, I can do that.
One of my main concerns is looking at this picture right now, the red roof. So if you go behind the building toward the bottom of the screen, right there, that's where basically his storage is now. And the location of that to my house currently is a far cry from where the proposal is going to be. It's taking it, out from the landscaping around the building and from behind the building and bringing it up into the forefront, literally right in front of my view, out of the house.
Could you go up there and point to where your house is on that graphic?
Yes, that one. That's 149.
Just want to make sure.
Currently, he's got his main storage back in this area here.
Right.
Which is, off the road, and he's got some landscaping around here. But again, that's a long distance, from my line of sight. And it's pulling it out from behind the building and thrown it right down in front of me. And, I just want to make sure that I'm not trying to be an obstacle to his growth at all. It is zoned light industrial, and I understand that. I just don't want today's decision or whenever this decision's made. I don't want it to become, okay, we'll give them this now and then it'll grow and it'll grow. And, empty dumpsters turn into full dumpsters and trucks and more, it kind of escalates into something more than maybe the understanding is right now. That especially view wise, that it doesn't turn from a storage yard, to sea containers and storage this and with all due respect into a junkyard. And I know Mr. Dreyer has expressed that, he likes to keep things tidy and neat, and I agree with that. And that's what, a lot of the write-up has to do with, there's been no complaints from residents because of the current location is out of the way, but now it's gonna be not in the way, but more in direct view. I just don't want it to escalate into something, favorable today maybe, or agreeable today and become something different decade from now, 2 decades
I
from now.
guess my response to you would initially be, and I hope Mark would follow up on this. The ordinances are the ordinances. That's why we have this kind of an opportunity to look at things and people can apply for a special exception or a variance, but that doesn't change the ordinance. So if things start to go away from what's been approved, then the city gets back involved. Neighborhood, community people might decide to say, no, and make a complaint. That gets looked at, that has to be remedied. So it isn't gonna have that kind of progression of growth. That's why we have these ordinances. Mark, do you want to make further comment to that regard?
I agree. So what's before the BZA tonight and the number of vehicles and the trips being discussed, that is what's being reviewed and approved. Any expansion to that, if they want to add a building, expand the activity on site goes beyond what is being approved tonight, they would have to come back before the BZA to ask for another special exception beyond what is being discussed.
Gotcha.
And same with his 21C as well. I'm sorry that he had mentioned expanding that area too at some point. That would have to come back through a special exception process as well. And the expansion of that property as well.
Good.
Anything else?
I'm finished. I didn't know if that question was directed at me or Mr.
I'm asking I'm not sorry, I forgot your name.
Mr. Hoffman.
Mr. Hoffman.
Yeah, I think I'm better.
Do you all making this application have any questions? Back to Mr. Hoffman.
I do not, other than I just would like to move the exhibits that we've previously submitted, as well as the new exhibit that we sent or that we showed tonight, exhibit 4A, into the record.
Yes, and we probably should have done that up front.
Yeah, it's okay.
I was just gonna ask if we could have Mr. Depot go through the exhibits and enter them.
If we're ready for a rebuttal for staff, I go at that point.
I
I
just
have a question, but I think it's for you, Mark. If, I want to understand when you were taking off the variance for the gravel, because it's not, what does that, I mean, I guess, what does that mean? It's still, I mean, that's commonly probably one of my biggest concerns as far as what that means. Is it just, we don't have a say in that, it is what it is, or can we make a recommendation that, for example, we approve based off of not having it as a gravel or making it asphalt? You tell me, I don't understand.
So, I mean, at this point, it's a special exception use primarily because of some understanding impacts of this use that the BZA looks at. So this is the time the BZA has the ability to address those impacts. If they don't, you leave in the hands of the Planning and Zoning Commission. So in this case, the BZA asks for certain things that cannot be otherwise modified by the Planning Commission, the Planning Commission cannot modify those elements. So if you were to ask that certain elements be located within a lot, like the roll-off dumpsters, or that certain areas need to be asphalted, or whatever it may be, that becomes part of the approval that has to be carried on by the Planning Commission that can otherwise not be changed. And again, I have more to go through my rebuttal, but that's essentially it. So that's why, even though it's looked at the Planning Commission stage, I think it's relevant at the BZA stage when we're looking at this particular use at this particular property, what elements should be applied to, reduce or eliminate potential impacts. Again, that's what I see the Board of Zoning Appeals responsibility, that you don't want then those elements to be taken away at the time of Planning and Zoning Commission.
Please.
I'm sorry to interrupt again. I believe you said earlier, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the parking for the vehicles that came in on and off the property, that had to be an asphalt base, right?
Yeah, so if by code, we look at the parking area, and that's mobile vehicles that are coming in and out, as you would imagine, the parking area being, and those areas being asphalt. If it's storage of equipment, like the roll-up dumpsters and things that are there, like period of time, that may be appropriate for gravel because it's not being moved or jostled or in a daily activity. We look at daily function primarily for those parking spaces. And you may want to look at the access drive too, how that operates, because you certainly don't want gravel and mud extending out into Magna Way from this property. So that's another element that even the site plan would look at.
So do we know what the total area of the gravel proposed for the storage of these other items is at this point?
No.
Yeah, that's the question I was alluding to. That was the question I was alluding to earlier, in terms of, is there any predetermination before you get into your actual site development plan as to where certain vehicles are going to go within this parcel? And that leads to the question that Mark is talking to, or a concern that Mark is talking to, about what kind of surface is required then, given the types of vehicles. So can you all address those two concerns, and I guess more directly to Mr. Dreyer, were you aware of those requirements by code prior to purchasing that particular lot with the intent of moving your vehicles to it?
No, I was not aware.
Okay.
To
the other question, can you address that in terms of now, what your thinking might be? Again, it would all have to go into your site development plan as to how you plan to use it.
Right,
So,
exactly.
so Mr. Dreyer, do you envision using all of this green hashed area as a gravel yard?
Absolutely not, no.
Okay. Just give me a rough percentage of what percentage of this area you think you would use as a gravel yard at we're going to call it the maximum level that we can think of right now that you think you would want. What percentage of this hashtagged area would you like to request at this time be a gravel or be a contractor's yard? Again, we'll get into the specifics of gravel and paving and parking and all that on the site plan, but just as just a general concept, what percent do you think you would be wanting?
So as a general concept for the next couple of years, I'd say 30%.
Okay, thank you. but the layout of that may depend on, you know, if we bring in because I personally, and I'm not the designer, but I would like to see some kind of a loop road, in which case we might not consider that the gravel yard. It might actually be more like in this area. I just don't know, but until we get into it. Right now, what we're trying to do is get the approval of the use, because we don't want to spend money with the next step of a full site development plan until we get approval of the use in general. So that's what we're trying to do tonight.
Do you mind if I say a
Yeah,
comment?
Of course, of course.
If anybody has question of why I purchased the land before knowing exactly what could be done with it, without sounding arrogant, I plan on being in this area for the rest of my life. I have a son who I hope that I can sell the business to someday. I really bought this lot to try to keep someone out of there that I didn't want there, which is why I'm so willing to work with these neighbors. I didn't want to look out my office window 10 years from now and regret, you know, when there's a manufacturing building out here, you know, where they make glass or paint cars or whatever it's approved for now. So I am willing to work, you know, with what everyone has to say. And in reality of things, after purchasing the land, I'm not going to be moving very quickly on any developments. I would, you know, appreciate, you know, for the next several years to have, you know, this 30%, you know, access. But no, honestly, without knowing exactly what I could, you know, get approved for this land, I was really trying to deflect someone coming in that is from a big industry. I'm still a small family-owned business. I'm trying to deflect a big industry or, you know, a big manufacturing facility from just plopping in here, you know, paving the whole thing and putting a 20,000 square foot building right in the middle of it. You know, so that was kind of like my first instinct, you know, as young as I am, trying to just prepare for my future.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
At this point, we've been at it for just a little over 2 hours, and before we close down your testimony and listen to Mark's rebuttal, I think it'd be appropriate to take a quick break. So let's take
Thank you.
for about 10 minutes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Ready to proceed?
I am. Yes, thank you.
Mr. Dreyer there, we need him, of course.
Mr. Depot, would you like me to stop sharing now? Or is it-
If you could.
Okay.
um,
Is that good?
All good.
Hmm?
Again, needs more from.
Want me to?
I'm waiting for Mr. Dreyer to come back, he's vacant.
Okay.
Would you happen to have an extra packet? That you've already printed? Got some of it, but I didn't get all of it.
It's all on the website too. Everything that we're looking at here is on the website.
Okay.
There we go. All right, let's call this back into session here again, and we'll turn it over to Mr. Martin.
Thank you.
So, and by the way, I think we need you to address all the exposures here.
Okay, can we do that?
Record.
Okay, so again, for the record, this is the attachments provided for tonight's meeting. Attachment one, or I'm sorry, exhibits for tonight's meeting, exhibit one being the BZA case 2210 staff report. Exhibit two, special exception variance application, which applicant's exhibit 11. Exhibit three is applicant's pre-hearing statement. Exhibit four is lot 21 plan, which is the applicant's exhibit 4, and then exhibit 4A, as the applicant requested, is the updated lot 21B plan. Exhibit 5, lot 21B tax map. Exhibit 6, lot 21B current owner deed. Exhibit 7, re-subdivision of lot 21 West Branch Trade Center plat. Exhibit 8, lot 21B SDAT information. Exhibit 9, City of Westminster zoning map. Exhibit 10, lot 21B, City of Westminster zoning map. Exhibit 11, BZA case 2106, lot 21C plan. Exhibit 12, applicant expert credentials, Richard Stover. Exhibit 13, lot 21B aerial view. And exhibit 14, applicant photos.
All are accepted into the record.
Thank you. Just to go over some points, we're talking about the use itself. I just want to clarify that it's unusual that we don't have a building structure associated with the use, but this is a contractor's equipment and storage yard. It doesn't necessarily have to be a structure associated with use. So again, that is a little bit unusual. As typical, we have those structures or buildings associated with it. Just some other elements, the hours of operation, they're limited to section 106.17. That's not modifiable by the BZA, so they are limited to those hours of operation. Staff was limiting the hours open from what the city code states to be a little bit more restrictive, and it's more in keeping than as to what the applicant had requested. Landscaping. It's very minimal landscaping. There are additional landscaping requirements. Staff is simply again asking that that's looked at further at the time of site plan, so additional landscaping is required. It's similar to runway storage. The BZA did do by special exception and additional landscaping provided. I'm asking the applicant not plant anything until they had actual approval for landscaping. I do not want landscaping to be planted that is not acceptable and would be an issue and have to be removed. So again, that's something that would be looked at the time of site plan. I understand the desire to jump ahead, but again, we do have certain standards that has to meet those requirements. Back to landscaping again, this goes to one of those elements. One of the requirements for outdoor storage is that a fence is required on top of landscaping in conjunction with landscaping as a class A screening as part of the landscape manual. But that can be modified by the planning commission. Staff is asking that the BZA condition that fence along the landscaping, and it would be around the area itself, the storage area, not the entire property. So that was a little confusing. It would be limited to the storage area would have to have the fencing, not the property itself. And again, that is a condition, but can be modified. Staff is asking if the BZA were to approve this use with the modification or the variance, that is required and cannot be then further modified by the planning and zoning commission. So again, the 50-foot setback, 30-foot setback along Magna Way is the applicant stated for additional landscaping. The access traffic was discussed, and the primary access drivers that services this comes off of Magna Way. I just wanted to point out that it is in the staff report and to the resident here and anybody listening that access to Old Bachman's Valley Road is prohibited. So you would not see at the time of site plan them proposing any access to Old Bachman onto the site. They would be limited by the access off of Magna Way as depicted on the special exception plat before the Board of Zoning Appeals tonight. And speaking of that, the area itself, I know we talked about 30% was brought up versus, so what's before the Board of Zoning Appeals tonight is that full green area. The applicant does not provide a smaller 30% area that's going to be determined for outdoor storage. What was before and what the plat provides is that entire green area, if approved, and if that special exception plan is approved by the Board of Zoning Appeals, is the area that outdoor storage can occur. Unless the Board of Zoning Appeals further modifies that or conditions that area further. And there is no understanding as to where certain elements are going to be located. The roll-off dumpsters were talked about, the crane, is that going to be extended, reserved down? So certain elements that should be taken into account. Stormwater management, I'm not quite sure that quality has been determined yet, maybe quantity, but again, that's more for the applicant. That's something that would be looking at the time of a site development plan. And that's really all I have. I just want for just rebuttal back to some of the comments that were raised. If you have any additional questions for me, I'm available.
You talked about last one again, the last topic you just brought up.
The area itself.
No, I got that, the last one. I was right on that.
Stormwater management.
Yes.
So they had mentioned that they believe that the existing stormwater management pond satisfies stormwater management on site. I cannot speak to that. That could address, we have two elements of stormwater management, quality and quantity. It certainly could address quantity, may not address quality. I don't know what was approved at the time that stormwater management facility was built, but at the end of the day, when they do submit a site development plan, it does go to the Carroll County stormwater management folks, environmental folks for review and approval. There's also forest conservation is a possibility. Again, that's all type of site plan. I just didn't want to make it sound, I don't want you to believe that stormwater management was a done deal. It still could be an issue at time of site plan. It's really not before the BZA, it's just in rebuttal to the comment that was made.
Okay. Questions? I guess at this point we would close testimony.
Everybody's done.
Is anybody complete? Do you want to make any kind of closing statement?
I just will make a very brief closing statement in the interest of time. Really, the central focus for tonight is that Mr. Dreyer is expanding his existing business, which is meeting a goal of the Westminster city planners, which is to keep existing businesses here in Westminster. And I think that Mr. Dreyer is going to be an incredible neighbor. He's already indicating above and beyond that he's willing to do more than's asked by the zoning ordinances. And we're looking forward to the next step and being able to present a site development plan that really fits with the spirit and intent of the zoning code. And thank you so much for your time tonight. I know this was a little bit longer and later than everybody probably wanted. And we look forward to hearing your decision. And we understand that there will be conditions pursuant to the special exception approval, and we appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. You had
I just had one really quick comment if I could. I did a drive-by of the site and the only thing that jumped out to me was the current storage yard. And this is just something for Mr. Dreyer to consider, either if this proceeds now or in the future, is to possibly beef up the plantings and the buffer of the existing storage area as well.
Okay, thank you. All right, at this time, I guess we'll formally close down testimony and open it up for board discussion. Who wants to start?
I will. Now, I have to separate in my mind, the applicant's, Mr. Drayer's existing business from the application for tonight, because I think, from everything I have learned from our previous, application and approval, and where he is today in his business, clearly, I mean, he's successful to this point. I'm sure it's going to be successful going forward. So I have to separate that from what I perceive with this application for a special exception on lot 21B, is that approval of that really gives, even with conditions that we've been talking about, really gives him a carte blanche to expand with a lot of heavy equipment, which I think would significantly impact negatively on the housing development there. I don't think he met his burden of proof on a number of the 15 points that were discussed earlier when it concerns the residential area. Mr.
Stouffer. Yeah.
Talked about orderly growth of the community, but he just focused on the IR zone. I don't think they will fully address the effect of odors and dust when it goes again applies to the residential area. Concerning conservation of property values, there was no indication whatsoever, other than just a statement, yes, I believe it's minimal. I don't think it will impact probably the other uses and other property owners in the IR zone. I'm not satisfied that they met the burden of proof on the conservation of property with that values. And as I say, I think, and frankly, I mean, one thing I would say, I think Mr. Drayer's proposal in terms of landscaping, I think is frankly a better solution than the county requires. I think what you're doing there and starting it early, in the use of the property, I think is probably the proper way to go. It's certainly going to, help, I think, the neighborhood, and I commend you for that, because it's not going to be cheap. I know that much. So generally, I don't, as much as I think, Mr. Drayer's business, I think, is successful and will be in the future. I just think this particular request for a special exception being so I would say unfocused, if you will, that the use of the property is really unfocused. And it may be just a chicken and egg situation here and, you know, whether he, you know, what's the best way to present this? And, you know, at the least amount of cost and to get the job done. I'm sure that's part of the issue for me, but the bottom line is what is before the board tonight, I think is too broad in terms of my vote for a special exception.
Well, I think that, one, it is industrial, it's zoned that way. I know this is a special exception. So it did sound like that you were there prior to, like not you, but all of the homes were there prior to, but it, to the building of the businesses, but it is an industrial. I think that he sounds like he's been a responsible neighbor to date, and I would have no indication to say that he would be other than that moving forward. With putting the requirements, I personally, the fence doesn't make sense to me, especially with how low, below the road line that would be. I don't think the fence would do anything. I think that would be a burden on Mr. Dyer that was just because we wanted to follow the rules. I think the landscaping itself is enough and sufficient without the requirement fence. I do think that the hours of operation, I don't know how you would word that you could say, oh, well, you can do the F-150 at 6 a.m., but you can't do the crane at 6 a.m. You know, ideally, if you could do that. So I'm a little hesitant to give carte blanche to starting up everything at 6 a.m. for the neighbors. I do understand that. But I think there can be, you know, we can meet in the middle with something like that. So I'm more inclined to say, hey, this is an industrial property. He's done a great job. I think that it's low enough. We already talked about it being 30 feet below the line of the homes, that you're not necessarily looking out to that. I think you do have some motivation if you can come back, if they're not following the rules, or if he wants to do anything extra above, build a building or whatever that looks like, he's got to come back to this board. I think that gives a little bit of support there too. So I'm actually inclined to think that we can make this work with some conditions. And
I kind of, when I first read this, and I, by virtue of the testimony we've heard tonight, had it separated in my mind, and it kind of remains that way, similar to what you're saying, that industrial restricted area is just that. And there's a road, and then there's housing on the other side. And I try to think about the last case that addressed the other parcel in this area. And I seem to recall that there were a number of the same kinds of issues. But we got to the point where they were reasonably abated. I understand Mr. Defoe's concerns from the ordinance point of view. I think the hours of operation would not, modifying slightly would not impede the overall function of the business. I personally liked, and it's been stated right from the beginning in the applicant's pre-hearing statement, that they like the idea of natural, and I do too. I've got a lot of landscaping around my house, and it stays that way. And I can appreciate that approach. And to Brenda's remarks too, I think that's a pretty harsh condition, because it is an industrial site that fencing is required. I think it needs to be looked at in the context of the whole. But landscaping would be a much better option. And if there was a concern for security, then I think there would probably be a reason why Mr. Dreyer would want to put fencing around his vehicles. But at any rate, the way this parcel is separated out and the ingress and egress, is there. I think the way this has been presented and the applicant's willingness to listen to neighbors leads me to believe that I think that what's been said addresses most of the concerns that are stated in the ordinance that are musts. To Mr. Barrett's comments about the 15 different conditions, those are that the board may consider. They all don't have to be considered. And you highlighted a number of them. I think those that stuck out to me have been, for the most part, addressed. My inclination is that with what still needs to be done to another layer of detail in the site development plan will determine how this thing really turns out. But I think based on what's been presented, my inclination is that I think they've done a pretty good job and answered a lot of questions that came up here too as well. And even listening to Mr. Depo's rebuttal from the point of view of wanting to maintain the restrictions that are in place, they're there for a reason. But there seems to be a willingness on the applicant's part to want to adjust and be a good neighbor. So I'm kind of inclined to go in that direction, but at any rate, I think that's all I have to say at this point. Anything else?
I'm just gonna ask that whomever makes a motion.
I always get it wrong.
Make
so.
sure that they address the criteria that you're to consider. Because of the fact that there have been statements made on both sides. So you want to just make it clear upon what you're basing your decision. That's somewhat self-serving, but so I can make sure I write it. Thanks.
You don't want to do it, I'll take a shot at it.
Don't ask me.
Okay, to the first criteria, which is there are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applying to the property in question or to the intended use of the property that do not apply generally to other properties or classes or uses in the same zone.
So you're looking at the variance?
Yeah.
Okay, can we start with the special exception? Because if you don't grant the special exception, you don't get to the variance. So,
All right, so to the special exception criteria, of those 15 different factors, I think that the applicant has addressed all of those that particularly apply. Not all of them do. Do I need to identify person beyond that? But I think generally the conditions have been met. This is an industrial area. It's being used for industrial purposes. It happens to be across from a residential area, but there is separation there. And while it's going to adjust the standoff, this distance, the factors that are involved, even that which seems to be of most concern, odors, dust, gas, smoke, fumes versus vibration, glare, noise. There's still enough of a separation there, in my view, that would allow this particular type of business to work there. I don't know what to comment to that. Do I need to have more detail?
just if you think that any of them are applicable, need to be considered.
all the ones that are applicable. I think, and when we're talking about orderly growth through a community, here we're talking about two separate zones. So, I mean, it is the orderly growth of the business in the IR zone. And I really don't think that impinges on the residential community part of it. The number of people residing or working in the immediate area, that fits within the definitions. I don't see any traffic conditions or facilities that are out of whack. I still think this is going to let people living in the area to enjoy their homes peacefully while this business is in place. I don't think there's going to be that much of a disruption, and especially what we're looking toward in terms of the screening that could take place. Property values, I mean, I don't know which came first. The properties were in there or the IR zone was there, but I had the same thing when I bought my own home in terms of what I was moving into and what was going to be allowed or not allowed. And I was even surprised by some things, but if everybody did their homework ahead of time, which they should, then I don't think there's going to be any real impact on property values. The use of the land and the structure, I tend to agree with Mr. Dreyer. He's trying to protect and conserve what he looks at as a chance to expand his business and at the same time be mindful of property values in the area. I really don't see anything else. I mean, Mark's comment about sewer and stormwater and runoff. I mean, that as part of the site development plan will have to be addressed as well. So I don't anticipate that's going to be an issue. And I don't think any of the others, even the last 4 or so, really come to bear. So that's that one. So I think in that regard, from my perspective, the burden has been met. Now we go to the variances. Oh, I'm sorry. All right, so now the conditions for the grant of special exceptions. Does the proposed use that not adversely affect the general plan or physical development of the district? No, I don't think it does. The proposed use at this selected location will not adversely affect health and safety of residents or workers in the area. It's an existing business that's been doing well. Overburdened existing public facilities? No. Again, to the comment from Mr. Depo about the stormwater drainage and so on, I think the site development plan will take care of that. And in terms of detrimental use or development of adjacent properties, the general neighborhood, again, I think there's sufficient demarcation, separation in terms of the business area versus the residential area, to include the comings and goings, ingress and egress being separated. So I think those standards have been met for special exception. That suffice?
So then you would,
I'll make a motion then, given all that the rationale, I make a motion that we improve the special exception.
Do we have to put the conditions in that motion?
If you're going to have conditions, yes.
Any discussion of further conditions? I think I got most of them in there, but
Don't you want like landscaping and
and I
yeah, I
think
mean,
that
definitely the landscaping needs to move forward. I think the site development plan needs to be as tight as it can be in terms of where this particular parcel, how much of it will be used. And I would hope that they would design that in a way to keep as much of the vehicles and equipment closer into, away from Bachman Valley Road, away from the residential area. But the landscape screening, the plantings, which is being offered, I think is a definite must and should move forward. The only other concern I had from a landscaping point of view, if you can call it that, or at least site preparation point of view, is what the flooring, if you call it that, material needs to be for these types of vehicles.
should we do a percentage, should we talk about a percentage that can be for storage, which means that's the only piece, the gravel and not the asphalt.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be reasonable.
I think so too, is, and, the other thing was make sure require Magna as the access and.
Yes. So,
Those are my three main.
So what was the last one?
Requiring Magna as
that would be
access.
the access.
Thank you.
I think that's it. So I would make that motion. The special exception.
I think we have to, do we have to determine the percentage that we are recommending for use of storage? Or no?
Based on the testimony, is that the percentage that?
I feel
We're
comfortable with
recommending.
that, if that was 30%.
30%. Yeah, I think that's adequate at this point. I mean, and that they can always come back.
And about the hours of operation, we didn't talk about that. Are we gonna maintain what the city has in place
Yeah, I
already?
think that should stand, yes.
Okay.
That the hours of operation be 7 to 7 to 8, is that what it? 8 to 7, sorry. 7
To
to
be
8.
consistent, it would be 8 a.m. opening on Saturday, Sunday, on state and federal holidays, and 7 a.m. on all other days. That would match the city code. that you want.
7 a.m. Monday through Friday and 8 a.m. on Saturday, Sunday, and holiday. That's
A
my motion.
motion.
Do we have a second?
You have a second.
All in favor? Aye.
And just a quick note before my vote, I feel that, I still feel my hesitations that I've expressed before, but given the fact that, because of the testimony and Mr. Dreer's track record as a business person and his, I guess concerns for the surrounding community, I can't support the motion, but I'll abstain.
So that motion is passed with one abstention. Moving on to the variances. First one being exceptional extraordinary circumstances or conditions applying to the property in question or the intended use of the property that does not apply generally to other properties or classes or uses of the same area. As to say before, I think the fact that we have the separation there between the IR and the residential areas, that I don't see that as I think that's taken care of. This is not really an exceptional use per se. It just, they're fitting the business into an area that's designed for that. Second is such a variance is necessary for preservation and enjoyment of substantial property rights protected by other properties in the same zone and in the same vicinity. I think that's pretty obvious that it is from the industrial point of view, from the applicant's point of view. To the extent that it is required, the variance, because of the distance factor. I think with all the other things that have been considered to adapt this particular use, that it's going to satisfy both ultimately, and the fact that the applicant is amenable to, has stated in testimony, open to input from residents. And he's offering to do the best he can to keep the area natural and keep it separate without building barriers, keeping it open that way to input. I think that satisfies my concern. And lastly, the authorizing of such a variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property and will not materially impair the purpose of this chapter or the public interest. Given the totality of the testimony and the concerns expressed by the city in rebuttal and what's now been offered in terms of investments and are likely to turn out in the site development plan, I think that particular criteria has been met. Can't think of anything else at this point. So I would make a motion that on that basis, we approve the variance.
And I'm sorry, I just want to make sure that we articulate what the variance is for. Because there were two variances that were advertised.
Right.
And so the one that you went through the criteria for and followed it through in the staff report was the request for 190-foot variance from the 300-foot required distance.
But the applicant requested for 100 feet instead of 190. Correct. 110, I think it was
It was
actually
one-
gonna be it. So not 190 was what the staff suggested.
And I'm sorry, the plan, and this is where it gets confusing, the plan shows 110 feet. The only way you get that 50-foot building restriction line, that distance that we're talking about to be planted in is at 110 feet. If you approve the variance as requested of 100 feet, they can then move that 50-foot depth gets down to 40 feet. So I was asking that if the BZA was to approve it, it would be consistent with the plat, the plan they gave, not the 100 foot, but the 110 feet away as depicted on the plan. So it's a variance of 190 feet to the 300
Got it.
versus 200 as requested by the applicant.
Okay, so to the I don't want to call this the right thing, to the variance requesting the distance that be approved at 110 feet. I'm sorry, 190 feet. The other way around, right? So with that, I'll make that motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
Okay.
Can I actually, I think I know I'm going back to the first approval that we already did, and I don't want to change that, but do we need to talk about the fence? If we don't talk about the fence, is it gonna go to zoning and he's gonna be required to do a fence if we do not put that in our motion?
I don't think we have jurisdiction.
We cannot say,
That was
Without a
not
fence?
before the BZA for determination or variance. So The only modification in landscape manual is by the director of planning.
Sorry, I tried.
Thank you.
That's another battle to be fought.
And then the last variance has been withdrawn, or?
Yes.
I would think it would have to be, it would be nice if the applicant would draw it.
Yes, we withdraw the second variance.
Thank you.
Okay. I think that makes us complete.
Yeah.
So with that, I would ask Karen, what the estimate is of doing this over together. For the applicant.
Days.
Generally, you've allowed 2 weeks for.
I've been allowing the 30
So,
days, but how much?
so I will have a draft to you within the next 2 weeks.
There you go. So we are adjourned.